I will say fake it until you make it. Just keep trying and keep doing it. It will happen. Yes, my background was not in staffing and I was not managing people and I was not doing what I was doing, but somebody gave me an opportunity. You want to try? And I say, why not? And it sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's scary. I've done a lot of training. I do a lot of research. I download a lot of articles. I'm always trying to keep myself up to date, but most of the time I start faking it until it becomes part of you, right?
True. Welcome to the People Powered Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things workplace culture. Let's help you reinfuse your workplace with that happiness factor, a show that gives you the expert insight to attract and keep happy, high-performing employees. I'm your host, Lorena Duguay, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the People Powered Podcast. Folks, we're doing a bit of a pivot. I'm not sure if I've shared this with our audience yet, but I'm working on my second book. And where the first book, The Happiness Factor, was really targeted to support organizations in understanding what 10 needs they need to be providing for in the workplace in order for their team members to feel happy and fulfilled at work. And it was really geared to the organization as a whole and really structured in a way that helps and supports them in mapping out the end-to-end employee experience, then reworking some of the key touch points throughout that experience, be it onboarding, orientation, et cetera, et cetera. But that was really from an organizational perspective. The second book is really targeted to an entirely different audience. It is targeted to individuals who are fed up of contending with those Sunday night scaries. It's for the individual who is really unhappy at work, but not really sure why, not really sure what's missing. And it's going to be, of course, covering a lot of those similar needs. However, it will also be providing a framework in order for once an individual has kind of landed on what are some of the things that are missing, some of those needs that aren't being provided at work, there'll be a framework for them to work within the scope of their existing circumstances. So work with their company to see whether or not there's ways that they can tweak their employee experience within their day-to-day in order to better provide for those. And or if they realize that they just don't, where they're at is not a great fit and they need to reinvent themselves. They need to figure out what that next chapter might look like. The same way that I hit that wall at one point in my career, realizing that I needed to figure out what the next chapter would be about. But I still recall having to Google, how do you figure out your calling? How do you figure out what you want to do, right? So the second book is going to be to save people having to Google. It will really help them reflect and map out what that next chapter of their professional career might look like. With that context in mind, the pivot I alluded to at the onset of this conversation is that we are going to start speaking to individuals who either themselves have recently undergone a transition and are going to share part of their experience, and or some professionals, some experts who can provide added insights into what are some of the emotions at play, what are some of the barriers that you're likely to encounter, and how might you start to navigate those different obstacles along the way in order for you to successfully transition into a professional career that is fulfilling and really fills your cup at the end of the day. So in light of that pivot, we actually have our first guest today, Lorena Perry, who is here to share her own experiences, but also has a really interesting kind of side gig going on where she supports a lot of individuals through their own transition. So welcome to the show, Lorena.
Thank you, Lorena. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. So before we get started, as I do, I've mentioned this time and time again, I don't really do intros and they make me just completely, uncomfortable having to read about someone when they're actually in the room or virtually in the room in this case. I would much rather that you tell our audience, share with our audience a little bit more about how Lorena got to doing what Lorena does today.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Lori, I was raised and born in Mexico, and I moved to Canada 22 years ago. When I came here, like a lot of newcomers, my background was in marketing and organizational development, and I was looking for a job within that area, and it was really hard. the idea of finding a job when you don't know the environment, you don't know the culture, and the employers think the same way. How's her English? And we don't know if she's going to adapt to the environment. So I got a lot of no's, and it was very frustrating. So my first opportunity was just networking. My neighbor was the VP of operations at a staffing company, and they offered me a job. It was very simple, entry level. I started as a sourcer, and eventually I moved up into the change and started doing more of recruitment. This is the point that I understood that I can use all my skills, my soft skills from back home, and to a new and completely different role that I've never done before. And after that, once I understood the other side of the equation, why a resume, even though you think you're a great fit for the role, they don't call you, and I was able to be on the other side of the coin, right? I understood why people were not getting calls. So my idea of sharing this and giving back to the community and letting them know how really things work once you apply for a job has been part of my passion. So I always try to help people and tell them, you know what, you need to customize your resume. You need to read the job description. You need to do networking. You need to do volunteering. So all these things that I didn't know when I just started looking for a job, now I'm sharing with the people I can, and I try to help them out.
You've taken essentially all of your own experiences and
Yes.
decided of your own volition to try and save others from going through some of the strife that you had to endure as you were trying to figure out why you weren't getting that call back or why you weren't successful in a particular competition. And you're now helping. So is that what you do on a full-time basis? Or from my understanding, it's more of a like volunteer side gig type thing?
It's a volunteer side gig. The first time I was just invited by coincidence. And then once one nonprofit found out that I was doing that, then another one called me again, and the word just spread out. So I think right now I volunteer within 8 to 10. I try to do one a trimester. During COVID, I was doing one per week, right? Because
Oh
people
my
were
God.
home. Yes. And things were switching. People were not ready to interview video, right? So we do a lot of coaching on how to interview, how to sit, and how to have good lighting, and how to look at the camera, things that we were not ready for, right? So yes, it is on the side, but I keep doing. I've been doing that for at least 14 years.
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. So let's talk about some of the clients you've encountered, some of the people that you've helped, and let's share a bit more about their stories. But before we get into their stories, I think between your own career transitions and the sum of all of these people that you've supported and helped throughout the years, you must have started to see some trends in that.
Yes.
What are some of the biggest barriers that individuals face when they're making a career transition in general? What are some of the barriers?
I think the biggest barrier will be ourselves, right? First, we think, oh, I cannot do that, or I am not going to get that promotion, or I am not going to get the raise. So we kind of cancel ourselves, in our heads. And
Before
that's the
we
biggest,
start.
yes,
Yeah.
before we even do it. So there's stats out there. And if you do some research, you'll see that 80% of people, when they ask for something, they get something. Maybe they don't get exactly the same promotion or the same change or the same salary that they were looking for, but they get something. The trick is to ask.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, yes. So
The
being
worst that's going to
being
happen is you're going to get a no or
yeah,
a variation of what you've requested, but you'll
yes,
get nothing if you don't ask, right? You miss
exactly.
100% of the shots you don't take. You get 100% of nothing if you don't ask.
Exactly. And also being able to think outside the box, right? Some people will say, okay, yes, I'm just going to ask for 5% raise because that's what everybody asks. Well, what if you ask for 10 and you show them, well, do your research and build up a case on why is that change or that request, and you'll be surprised that most people
Okay.
do get something.
I like that. So one of the barriers you're seeing is people themselves and stopping themselves before they even get started. Kind of listening to that mind chatter and thinking that, that you're not going to get it, you're not going to get that promotions. you're thinking about everything that could go wrong, but what I'm hearing is you should be thinking about everything that could go right, and you need to make sure that you're thinking outside the box. If, for example, you are requesting a raise, you are wanting to request a promotion of sorts, and you feel deserving, to build your business case, but within that business case to have variety of options. Is that kind of what I'm hearing too? So that by you're providing them options to play with, rather than just coming in with one request and it's that or nothing. You're probably best to have a few options on the table.
And it's funny because today I had a 15-minute session with somebody that I'm helping on the side on my lunch break. And it was the same thing. So this person has a project management background from back home. And here he believes that he also can do some admin roles. So he was saying, should I follow, the project management, or should I be creative and do a big career change? I'm new in Canada and I'm moving to admin. And I said, do both. Follow both, because you don't know which one is going to hit first. And if you put all your, eggs in one basket and this doesn't work out, you could be missing on the other side, right? So I said, kind of have two resumes. One is more project management. The other one is more admin. Admin for this person is completely a career change. So it will have to be more focused on soft skills and how can you change what you've done in the past to project that you have those skills, even though you were not an administrator. So,
my brain is just, I use a lot and I leverage a lot of technology and innovation kind of stuff. So are you encouraging your clients, for example, like to translate that resume? ChatGPT would totally do that in a heartbeat.
Yes.
If you were to prompt it to say, I'm going to feed you my resume. It is primarily project management themed and related. I need you to rewrite this resume to be admin relevant to, and even you can feed the job description in that he's wanting to apply for, or a job description that he would apply for, and say, write my resume for this. Like, why not? Why spend too much time trying to do it yourself when you can actually leverage some of the AI out there to help you out with that, right?
Yes, and the only advice I'd give is at the end, do read whatever ChatGPT gives you back, because sometimes some people, I did this, and then they send it, go, okay, and they ask questions and they cannot even answer their own
100%.
based on their own resume. So it's very important that, yes, use the technology, but then make it your own. So maybe there's some wording there that ChatGPT is using that is not a word that you will never say. Yeah. And I can tell when I talk with people and I have the resume, I go, did you write your resume? And they just go like, no. Right. So you need to own it. And it's okay to use that technology, but maybe that's 80% of what the resume, the final document is going to be. But then, put a little bit of your personality in there. So
absolutely, it's a great starting point. It's a great starting point, but then you absolutely need to infuse it with the flavor of you and your being. You also, what's beautiful about that, leveraging that kind of technology, and once you've edited it and it has your flavor, it has the Lori feel, if you will, if I'm doing it for myself, I can spend that much more time looking at it and thinking about stories, because the stories are super important when you're going through an interview, and having your very the PAR stories, where you give a problem, what's the problem, the challenge you encountered, what are some of the actions you took, and then what was the results, in order to fit that job description, in order to fuel it. So spend more time then on thinking about those stories, those relevant stories that you'd be able to share in the event that they ask a particular question or ask you to provide evidence of a particular competency.
And that's something you can do fantastically on LinkedIn, right? You can tell a story. So a resume is probably more facts or, what have you done? But on LinkedIn, you can go and say, I'm new to the country. My background is project management. I'm moving into admin because of this. And this person had a very nice story on how he was managing a restaurant, but he did a lot of the admin. So he can tell that as a story instead of just having a resume. So I think telling a story is a great way. And on LinkedIn, you can add videos and you can add a little bit more flavor to it. Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so obstacles yourself, think outside the box. Are there any other barriers that some of your clients are encountering as they're transitioning into the labor market? here in Canada? Because primarily a lot of your clients are newcomers to the country, right?
Yes and no. Sometimes I have people that have been working for the longest time, somebody that has been in the same job for 20 years or 30 years, and now the company closed down or they move locations, and they don't want to move, or, there's some reorg, and now they're back into the market. They have not touched their resume in years. They have no idea on how a video interview is or works, and they're not prepared for that. So I think it's overall somebody that is either looking for a job or trying to make a career change that I help.
Okay, amazing. I heard you reference a couple times video, preparing for a video interview. They're a little intimidated by that. What are some of the tips that you provide your clients with in terms of preparing it and kind of doing a good virtual interview?
Well, some are very similar as a normal interview. So doing mock interviews are great, right? Like right before we started this, we were trying to check how the lighting is and how the sound works. So do that with somebody that it's, your partner, your friend, your neighbor, and try it out before you do the actual video interview so you don't run to any mistakes. And the typical things I would say, turn your phone down, which I did for today. Turn your phone down. Try to stay in a closed room where you don't have interruptions. The way you sit. I have people that get very nervous and they will start like moving in their chair or looking up. So the way you sit, trying to look at the camera. The advantages of a video interview is if you have certain documents that you want to use while you're doing the interview, you can have your resume there, you can have the job description. I had given tips when I see people that are very serious and very nervous, put a post-it on top of your computer with a happy face.
Yeah,
So it reminds you to smile. It reminds you to relax. So
absolutely.
It's the space, the lighting, how you sit, no interruptions, and doing a mock interview with somebody else previously will help you a lot. Oh, yes. And dressing up. Oh, I know, Laura's like, oh, you're missing something, sweetie.
Well,
Yes,
I was
yes.
doing interviews. I had a client hire us to do this kind of mass recruitment. We were doing interviews, and I had people come on to the interview in a pajama. In a pajama. And it was a tank top pajama. I was like, wow, I feel
Are you comfortable?
And they were sitting in their bed. Speaking of setting, it's not to have judgment. It's just if you prepare, that translates. It tells me, you thought this interview was important enough to make sure that you had at the very least, sleeves on your shirt, and that you were sitting at a table or something that would be more professional than sitting in your bed and I see your nightstand.
And I also think is you want to treat people the way you want to be treated. So if you show yourself on time and you're dressing properly and you talk with respect, you're gonna get the same back, right? So and if you're just like on the side and
if you're
not
just
listening,
slow, yeah, absolutely.
I also give a little sometimes tips on how to react, right? When somebody is talking to you and you want to show interest, instead of say I'm interested, if you lean forward a little bit, that shows that you care. Yes. But if you lean back and you cross your arms, that means that you're really not listening. So there's certain tips that body language that can help you.
That nonverbal is conveying. Yes. And I actually teach a strategic communications workshop. And when I ask people what percentage, in terms of how your message is interpreted, what percentage do the words you choose make an impact on how it's interpreted? And I hear crazy numbers like 80, 70, and it's actually 7%. Only 7% of how your message is interpreted is dependent on the words you choose. The other percentage has to do not only with your nonverbal, which is pretty much
the tone,
the heaviest. It's your voice inflections, your tone. Yes. Are you calm? Are you sleeping? Are you speaking really, really fast? Are you agitated? Do you have a loud voice or do you have a low voice? All of that will make or break, and the words you emphasize throughout. But it's super interesting that you also give those tips to your candidates, to your clients, to help them be more successful in that interview. You
And
reference.
one more. So when people are newcomers and English is their second language, like is with me, I used to practice with a pen in my mouth.
Okay.
Yes, because that will help me to slow down. And I still speak pretty fast, but that will help me to slow down and to articulate.
I like it.
And that really helps for interviews, right? Because one of the big worries for employers is that the newcomers' English is not up to level. And if at home you don't speak English, which that's most of the cases, if you are here with your family and you speak in another language, and then the phone rings and you pick up, that transition is hard. So I always recommend at least 1 hour a day, 2 hours a day, when you're having a meal, when you're together with your family, practice your English,
I
because
like
that
that.
is going to help you for the
You were
interview, right?
talking about how we get in our own way. And I suspect that as a newcomer, and to the point you're just talking about, do they tend to kind of write themselves off for certain, oh, it's because I've got this, I won't get the job. It's because of this, I won't get that. Like they write
Yes.
themselves off. So what are some of the things that they sometimes write themselves off for, thinking they couldn't fit that job because
Oh,
of
there's a couple. So the overqualified, that's
okay.
big. Somebody that back home they were managing, a whole manufacturing place with 300 people, and now they're here applying for a project manager of 10 people, right? So they want to work and they're eager and they can do the job with their eyes closed, but they say, okay, I'm not getting interviews because they see my resume, I'm overqualified. That will be
Hmm.
one.
Okay, so you're
Yes.
speaking from the perspective of the employer, why they might not interview them. They assume they're overqualified, or is this the person who's just assumed the reason they're not getting calls is because they're overqualified?
It's both.
Okay, okay,
It's
fair
in both
enough.
sides. Yes. But
Yeah.
mainly when I talk with the candidates, they say, okay, I'm not getting interviews because I'm overqualified. And if I
Okay.
talk with the client, because I'm also working in staffing, sometimes they will say, okay, they're not going to last. They're too good. And I had people that they say, this person can do my job. So
Yeah. Okay.
they're a little bit afraid there. So it's in both sides.
Okay. Fair enough. And you said you had a couple of things. What else?
Yes. So, and the second one is, and it's kind of related with being overqualified, is the year of your education or your graduation. Um, a lot of people want to take it out because they think, okay, they're not gonna want to hire somebody that, is a little bit more seasoned and or older. And I always say, well, if you take it out and they interview you, they're gonna know. Eventually, they're gonna know. Or if they hire you and you have all this experience and all this knowledge, are you gonna limit yourself not to do it because they think you have less years? So I always recommend it's better to put the truth, and let it be. And the question is, do you want to work for a company that doesn't want to hire somebody of your experience and is, walking away from that? So my answer is no. I'd rather work for somebody that values what I bring to the table. But a lot of people are afraid that for those reasons they're not getting interviews, so they take the year of the graduation out.
100%. And it speaks to fit and alignment, right? And not being afraid of declining an opportunity if you're not feeling that it's right. I think that
Yes.
a lot of people will settle, for lack of a better word. They'll settle because they just want a job, but then they end up being completely unhappy and it's completely draining. So it's to make sure that you're applying for positions, you do a bit of research about the company to see what are their
Yep.
values. Are these people do they stand for something that I want to stand behind as well? How does that align with my own personal values? Because if you are applying and walking into a company and accepting a position in a company that has completely opposing values than you have, it's going to show. It's going to show in the way that you show up at work. They're going to feel it. It's a lose-lose situation. So ensuring that you spend some time understanding what kind of company and kind of profiling, what kind of a company do I want to work for? What would that ideal job look like? And tailoring your search accordingly, right?
And I always say the interview goes both ways. So when
Ah,
they're
yeah.
interviewing you, you should be interviewing them. My questions are, I will be like, what do you like of working here? Like, what are good things about the environment? Or tell me more about the size of the team. Tell me more about your management style. And you get to know more of them. And it's also for you to decide, do I like this? Do I like what I'm hearing? Is this aligned for, my goals and where I want to be?
And it speaks to autonomy too, right? Right away, one of the needs in the book that I cover is autonomy and empowerment. And if you're asking questions to them in the interview, for me, that conveys someone who is independent, is driven, is not afraid of asking questions. I want to have people who work for me who are not afraid to ask questions, who are, when they're in doubt, they're asking me about it, right? It shows in and of itself a great kind of characteristic that a lot of employers are looking for. So absolutely interview them, ask them questions, do a bit of research ahead of time, even to say, hey, I noticed on your website that, what does that convey to me? This person took the time to research. This person took the time to prepare, which speaks to their work ethic and speaks to how interested they are in this position. If we can visit, just go back a bit to when you were saying you're interviewing them, and not accepting something that isn't aligned with you and whatnot. I think that people need to oh no, you know what? It's not there. Sorry, listeners, I'm getting a bit confusing here. I want to actually back it up to oh my God, I'm losing my train of thought. What kind of a day is this? What I'm trying to get at is, if people are unhappy at work, they will actually leave. Oh, it's the overqualified piece where people, won't hire someone because they're overqualified. Employers, I've said this before, do not pass up a candidate assuming that they're overqualified and you can't afford them. I mentioned this in the book as well, that someone who is unhappy at work in their current job will leave for less money.
Yes. And I have stats for that.
You have stats for that. There
I
you
have
go.
stats for that. Yeah, it's about 85 to 90% of people would leave a job because of bad management, not because of money. So
Absolutely.
if they're not happy, it's normally because the manager, maybe they don't let them do what they want to do, or they don't let them grow, and they feel stuck. But we think it's money, and that's not the main motivator to make a change. But another thing, I always try to play the devil's advocate when I'm talking with somebody. It's okay, I want to leave my job because I'm looking for this and I want this, and I don't like certain things at work. And my first question is, have you asked for a change? Have you asked for the things that you're missing? Because we always see the grass greener on the other side. And I've seen people making changes, and sometimes very radical, like completely changing careers. And then, a month, 6 months, sometime later, looking back and say, oh, I was enjoying more of that. Before you make a move, try to fix where you are and what you have. If it's fixable, right? There are certain situations that you have to leave for mental health. That's another thing that is key for
absolutely,
or in my approaches when I'm coaching.
Absolutely. And you can't get what you don't ask for, and you might regret it down the line and notice that someone at your former employer got exactly what you wanted, but it's why? Because they asked for it. So that's exactly why we're going to write the second book the way that we are, in that before you concoct your exit strategy, let's first see how we can work within our current circumstances, and how can we support you in and coach you to asking those things, asking for what you need and having those needs fulfilled. During our initial conversation, Lorena, you had said something to the effect of chaos. You see chaos as both a challenge and an opportunity. And that really stuck with me. So I would like to maybe for you to share with the audience how this mindset has helped you in your own career transitions, and how do you instill this resilience in the people that you coach?
Oh, how do I instill the resilience? I wish I could pass it on to everybody. I always say, why not? My company was in a big chaos. It was being acquired by another company. They were shrinking the organization like in half. People were resigning because they were worried they were not going to get the proper package, so they were not waiting for the package. They flattened everything, and I went and talked to my boss, and I said, I like what I do. I would like to do more, and I would like to move into something else. And he says, will you do sales? I was like fully in recruitment. So this is the chaos part, right? Like sales. So instead of wondering, or instead of saying, I've never done that, or I don't know how to do that, I said, why not? So that's kind of my attitude, right? When I was at home and they offered me the job as a sorcerer, and I wanted to be a coach, and I couldn't be a coach, and I said, why not? At least I'm doing something. Now you want to be a recruiter? Why not? My husband always wonders, like, why are you moving to this job if you're doing so well in here? Why not? Right? Let me go in. And it does have a little bit of a strategy, but it's more of that. Let me see what else is out there, and I think it's also aligned with my personality. So that's another thing that I would recommend anybody that is trying to make a career change, or change jobs, or is wondering if the job they're doing is the right job, to do just a personality test. You can get so many online, because it will tell you a little bit of what are the skills, the soft skills that you have. My personality is very aligned to sales, customer service. I like talking with people. I can talk a lot, and that's just something I enjoy. I don't get nervous, right? Maybe I get nervous the first 3 seconds, and then after that is okay. I'm not nervous anymore, and I'm loving this. So I'm better at it than if you put me on a computer to program, or just to upload information, and I'm not talking with people. So here, when I'm working from home, I go outside and I start talking with the neighbor. I get on the train and I'm talking to strangers, and my whole husband will say, "Oh, you know this person?" No, I don't know them, but now I feel like I know them, and they're my friends now, and I already gave them my number, and they're coming for dinner next week, right? So it's trying to align a little bit of your personality with the things that you want to do. So for me, the chaos part is why not?
I love it.
It's there, and instead of being a chaos, I was talking about the yin yang. It's the same part of the circle, but I've just moved from the black to the white, and it became an opportunity, and I was able to move into sales, and I was very, very successful for 2 years in that position.
Amazing.
And it was just taking care of the chaos part.
Yeah, it's about reframing chaos from a challenge to an opportunity.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
if I were to see this as an opportunity, instead of think of all to our point earlier, right? Instead of think of all the things that could go wrong,
Yes.
what if I started to reflect and focus on all the things that could go right, and allow my emotions to kind of dictate according to that frame rather than the previous frame? Because the fight or flight will say, if you're thinking of all the things that could go wrong,
Yeah.
it's going to give your mind is going to give you 1,000 reasons why not to do it, and why to run away, right?
I have a little analogy, very simple. It's fire. Like if you see a fire, some people will say, "Oh, there's a fire, and it can get bigger, and then it can burn all these things," and people want to try to put it down. I will be saying, like, "Where are the marshmallows? There's a fire. Like, we need sticks and marshmallows before you turn it like away." So, is that kind of mentality. Whenever something's coming to you, and you think is negative, or is bad, or is draining you, try to flip it, right?
Flip it.
I was coaching one lady recently, about 2 months ago. She came back after a personal leave, like a very painful leave that she had to go back home. A relative died. She comes back, and they demoted her on her position because she was not able to perform, but she was gone for 2 months. So, and they demoted her, and they offer her training for 6 weeks to put her back on her position. And she was so upset because it was a demotion. And I said, they didn't fire you. They're training you. They're giving you your job back. Like, hello. Employers normally don't have that patience. So that means they like you. They know you have the skills, but your mindset was not in the right place because of the personal issues that you have. So she was so sad to the point that she was almost crying. And I'm like, what? No, listen, girl, like you're still there, and they're training you. Training you for me is like the best gift an employer can give you.
I'm gonna
Besides bonus. bonuses,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. But I'm going to check all of the HR red flags that are going off in my head from that particular
Oh,
story.
yes.
But no, you're right. Like look at the glass half full. And to your point about the personality assessments, similar to figuring out what aligns and going for work that aligns with what you love, I would say also when it comes to seeing the glass half full, certain personalities just naturally gravitate towards that half full, while others find it very challenging because they are so afraid of failure that they will get in their own way
Yes.
in order to avoid that failure. So, how is it that you coach them into embracing that mindset? Are there any tricks or tips that you provide them or maybe some questions that you ask them to help them kind of stumble on that mindset and start to get comfortable in that mindset?
Okay. I have a question that I always ask, and it's kind of sadistic, but I always say, is somebody going to die?
Yeah.
So if nobody's going to die, then just refocus. Like, and at this point, I told her, like, you still have your job.
Mm.
But I couldn't use that question because she just came from a funeral, so it was not the right moment. But when I have other situations like that, is you need to focus on the positive. Nobody's dying, right? And and then how are you going to approach what's coming next?
Mm.
And I try not to see it as negative. It's just an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
If you're being let go from a job, it's because what's coming next is better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you think like that, it will happen. I don't know, Lori, but it's if you think it, you say it, and if you say it, you do it, and if you do it, you become that. So don't even think about it. Like somebody says, "Oh, that's not going to work." Oh, don't say it. Don't even mention it because then you have that in your mind, and you're giving the opportunity for things to go wrong or not to happen, and going to that way. So
Putting it out there.
it starts from how you think.
100%. And some of the questions that I use with my coaches are, you were talking about saying, what if you need to see this as a positive? I actually ask them, how could this be a positive? How might
Oh,
this turn out
okay.
to be a positive? And have them really kind of think about it and really hone in on, and sometimes they're like, I don't know what, there is no positive. Well, I'm pretty sure if you try a bit, we're going to figure out how this might be positive. How could this
Yes.
maybe change into or transmute into something different, something better? What would that look like? And then suddenly they start to stumble on there. Another key question I like to ask when they're hesitant, when they're afraid of that failure is, what's the worst that can happen?
Who's going to
What's
die?
the worst that can happen? I want you to tell me what's the worst. And then as they start to say, well, I could da da da, and then what? Well, then I'm gonna da da da, and then what? Well, then that wouldn't be that bad. Ah, so if that wouldn't be that bad, you got two options here. You can sit in the unknown and try and run the other way, or you can take a risk because
Yes.
we've explored all the positive that could come from this. We've talked about the worst that could happen. And from the sounds of it, you seemed okay with both of those happening. So how about you take this risk and let it go where it needs to go.
Yes.
So amazing. I can't believe we've already been talking for 37 minutes. We've
We
explored.
said 30.
Can you believe? I said, oh, we're going to try to
Uh,
keep it at 30. So, just to wrap it up, you provided some really insightful career transition advice, everything from interviews to not getting in your own way to thinking outside the box. If you're asking for, be it the transition within your existing company, you want to ask for that promotion, you want to ask for that raise. Think outside the box, provide different options. You also shared about not locking yourself and putting all your eggs in one basket, making sure you've got a variety of eggs in that basket, because if one breaks, you've got others to fall on. You talked about that mindset of seeing the positive and focusing on the positive. You also gave some great tips for, I really particularly liked, for someone who French is my first language. I can get in my own way sometimes thinking, oh,
right.
my accent is showing. But you were explaining some of the tricks that you do, putting your
Yeah.
your your, your
Yes.
finger in your mouth to talk, to practice during mock interviews, to slow yourself down, and to just, I loved everything you shared about that. I don't even know how to sum it up into just anything other than for someone who is thinking about a transition, I feel like or they're currently maybe interviewing, or maybe they're already in their way and they haven't applied, you've provided a lot of tips in terms of how to take that next step, which is the most important. Again, another thing I say with my coachees is, okay, what's the biggest little step you could take today? And how are you actually going to make that happen? So I want to flip that to your side now. And if there was one parting thought, quote, idea, something a nugget of wisdom that you want to leave with our audience, relevant to navigating transitions, relevant to just wanting to figure out what that next chapter is and taking that first step, what might that be?
I will say, fake it until you make it. Just keep trying and keep doing it. It will happen. Yes, my background was not in staffing, and I was not managing people, and I was not doing what I was doing, but somebody gave me an opportunity. You want to try? And I say, why not? And sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's scary. I've done a lot of training. I do a lot of research. I download a lot of articles. I'm always trying to keep myself up to date, but most of the time I start faking it until it becomes part of you, right?
Natural. It becomes part of who you are. To your point of that gentleman who wanted to rewrite his resume to apply for a completely different type of work, despite, that's another thing that you shared, which was really powerful to, if you're thinking you're too experienced or you're afraid to put the date that you graduated because that might write you off before you even begin, use it as a strength, change that into a strength and bring that to the table. Definitely. But to the point of, like you were saying, there are some transferable things that we don't recognize. So faking it till you make it is really only a technique of, it's an interim technique until you realize, accept, embrace, and tap into the stuff that you already know. Right? Amazing. If people would like to connect with you, Lorena, how might they do that? What's the best place to connect with you on?
They can all find me on LinkedIn, Lorena Perry, and I can share the link if you want.
Yeah, we'll share the link, all the socials, and any contact information that you're willing to share with the audience.
And I also have, I also have a YouTube channel, Latina Recruiter in Canada. And so a lot of the things that we talk, I have like little videos of 5 minutes that will talk about all the snips and things that we talk about today. Interviews and mock interviews, resume. Yeah.
Awesome. So it sounds like there's a repository of videos that continue to provide all these tips that Lorena has housed that she's done on her YouTube channel. So we'll definitely share that as well. Thank you, Lorena, for joining us today.
Thank you, Lori. It was a pleasure. I loved it.
I loved it as well. And as always, listeners, like I said just a few seconds ago, I guess, or a minute or so ago, I want you to think about everything you've heard today. And I'd like you to choose the biggest little step you could take to make one of those things actually happen, to bring one of those things to realization in your life, and go do that.
Thanks for joining us for yet another enriching conversation. To hear more about today's guest, make sure to check out the links in the description of the episode. Liked what you heard? Make sure to like and share this on all your socials. Want to continue the conversation? Head on over to our social media platforms to keep it going. Ready to find out how your workplace culture measures up? Then make sure to check out our website at www.bepeoplepowered.com. That's www.bepeoplepowered.com to take our free Happiness Factor culture check. And then sign up for our also free People Powered portal to start building your very own culture transformation action plan. Finally, make sure to subscribe to our show to make sure you don't miss another valuable episode.